History 1. I was a 25-year-old woman back then, standing at 5'3" tall. I've always been grateful for my attractive looks, though it sometimes brings challenges. My natural auburn hair has a unique shade, and my figure is naturally slim with curves in all the right places. It's not uncommon for both men and women to approach me. I'm a kind and friendly person, and I appreciate those who offer compliments and then move on, or those who start a romantic conversation and take rejection gracefully. However, some people don't understand when I'm not interested and keep bothering me. Unfortunately, this happened quite often, but this one man took it to another level. I had recently come out of a bad relationship and had moved back in with my parents since I didn't have my own place yet, so I slept on the couch downstairs. The story begins on the very first night after my move. It was a pleasant evening, the sun setting with the Arizona sky painted in hues of pink and orange. I took my 2 dogs to the nearby park. We lived in a neighborhood that was part of a larger community, with a long, winding road leading from the entrance to the back where our house was. My parents' home was only a few houses away, just across a road. I walked to the left, heading to the other side of the park, using the path that circled it. There was a large open area where I let my dogs run freely for a while. After about 15 minutes, I called them over, put their leashes back on, and continued on the path. I passed the play areas and picnic tables in the middle of the park. Beyond that, there was a smaller open space. I was almost at the basketball courts, finishing my walk, when I saw a man watching 2 young kids playing basketball. The kids looked to be about 7 or 8 years old, and the man seemed to be in his late 30s. He had a solid build and was probably around 6 feet tall. As I approached, one of the kids asked if they could pet my dog. I told him it was okay to pet my pit bull Max, but my miniature schnauzer Bella didn't VDDTM like kids and stayed close to me but not too close. Max was thrilled to receive all the pets, wagging his tail and showing that friendly pit bull grin. The kids were showering Max with affection when the man started a casual conversation with me. Being polite, I replied to his small talk. "How's your evening going?" he asked. I replied, "It's nice out here." He said, "Yeah, we've been here for a while. How about you?" I nodded and said, "Just up the road." He seemed pleased and said, "Oh, really? We live just down there," pointing down the same road. His kid chimed in, saying, "We aren't that close, Dad." At the time, I didn't think much of it, though looking back, it was a warning sign. In that moment, I thought the kid just saw a short walk as a big deal since they have little legs and minds that jump from one thing to another. We both laughed and moved on. I told him I needed to get back to give my dog some water. The older boy, who hadn't VDJ-TMT spoken much, had already gone back to play basketball. The kid, who was clearly the man's son, stayed with us. The dad said, "Yeah, we're heading that way too, so I'll walk with you." I didn't really want him to, but I couldn't just say no. I'm not rude like that. As we walked, it was clear the other kid wasn't the man's son, but just a neighborhood child playing with them. It was just the dad and his son walking with me. I cut through the basketball courts, went through the rocks, and reached the sidewalk before crossing the road. During this walk, the guy started asking more questions. "So it's just you and your husband?" he asked. I replied, "No, I'm not married." "Oh, who do you live with?" "I just ended a relationship, so I'm staying on my parents' couch for now." "That's nice. What do they do for work?" he asked. I didn't want to share too much, so my answers were brief. He then asked if they had long working hours during the day. At this point, the questions were getting too personal. I started giving shorter answers, trying not to reveal too much, but I mentioned that my dad worked from home and was hardly ever away. I was relieved that our house was just 2 houses away. When we reached the edge of the second house, I stopped. Bella, my miniature schnauzer, was still close to me, cautious around the stranger. I told him that Bella is usually well behaved in public, but can get aggressive on our property or in my car. I explained honestly, and the man seemed to understand and said, "No problem. Have a good night." I replied the same and walked up to my yard. I unclipped the dog's leashes near the front door and unlocked it, then headed inside, making sure to lock the door behind me. As I went to check if the dogs had water, I heard Bella snarling, which was unusual. She usually didn't do that without a reason. I peeked out of the blinds in my living room window and saw the man and his son walking back to the park. There was only one car at the park, and apart from the young boy playing basketball, there was no one else around. It seemed strange to need a car if you lived nearby and said you were walking home, only to return to the park. But there was nothing I could do, so I moved on. The next night, I was waiting for a grooming appointment as I ran my own grooming business from home. I still had about 40 minutes before the appointment and was doing some online work when I heard the doorbell ring. I thought my client had arrived early, which happens sometimes, so I went to the door to let them know I'd put my dogs away and be right back. However, when I opened the door, it wasn't my client. It was that man. He asked me, "Hey, what are you doing?" with a lot of excitement. I replied a bit awkwardly, "Hey, not much. What's up?" He said, "I'm heading to the park and thought you could come too, but why don't you leave the dogs behind this time?" That was weird, but I couldn't and wouldn't leave my dogs behind, so I explained that I had a client coming any minute. He seemed disappointed but said okay and left. The next night, I got another knock at around the same time. It was dark outside and I had forgotten to turn on the porch light. I opened the door and turned on the light at the same time. Guess who? It definitely wasn't Santa. Once again, he asked me to come to the park, insisting that I leave my dogs at home. I told him I couldn't go with him, even though I had no plans and could have if I wanted to. I was polite but kept my answers short to show I wasn't interested. After all, he was old enough to be my dad. He asked, "When can you come then?" I explained, "I'm self-employed and take appointments on the same day, even last-minute ones for animal rescues. I work as an in-home groomer, so my schedule can be pretty crazy, and I don't always know when I'll be available." He said, "Oh, okay, I understand." He seemed disappointed and then said, "Maybe in a few days then." I replied, "Yeah, maybe, it's uncertain," with an uncomfortable smile, hoping he would get the message to leave me alone. On the third night he came by, which was the fourth time since we first met, I didn't answer the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and it was around the same time, so I knew it was him. Luckily, I wasn't in the living room this time, so the TV was off, and it would have looked dark inside from the front of the house. He rang the doorbell again, but I just let my dogs keep barking, making it seem like no one was home. Eventually, he left. I had told my dad as he was about to go downstairs that it was a friend I didn't want to see and that he would leave on his own shortly. My dad didn't really care, so he just shrugged and went back to his office. It was now the 5th day since I first met the man, and that night there were no knocks on the door. I didn't think about it at the time. I went about my day and later settled on the couch to sleep. At some point during the night I woke up. I wasn't sure what had woken me up. It was really dark except for the occasional blue light blinking from a computer connected to the TV under the TV stand. As the light blinked and lightly lit up the room, I noticed my pit bull Max standing right in front of me. Max was stiff, staring at something behind my head near the kitchen doorway. He was growling, which made me jump up and look behind me. I was terrified to see a man there, about 6 feet tall with a strong build. It was too dark to see his features, but as he stood there without moving, I gasped. This seemed to trigger Max, and he got the message that this guy wasn't supposed to be there. He lunged at the man, who spun around quickly. I grabbed my gun from the coffee table. It took a moment because my hand was shaking, and the darkness made everything on the table look like random black shapes. I got the gun ready and hurried into the kitchen, where both my dogs and the man had gone. The doggy door that could be put in and out of the sliding glass door was completely torn apart. It had collapsed and broken. The sliding door was barely open, so the man must have jumped through it. I rushed into the backyard, worried that the gate might be open. My dogs usually don't run away, but when chasing an intruder, you never know how far they'd go. Without shoes, I hurried through the rocks, which was painful. The gate was closed and locked. The man must have jumped over the wall. Max was near the gate, looking through the wood as best he could, his body tense and alert. Bella kept pacing back and forth along the wall. I called them over, and then we went back inside. I removed the broken doggy door and shut the sliding door tightly. I locked it and also checked the windows. I should have called the police, but at the time, I didn't think I had much information to give them. Looking back, that was a big mistake. I should have reported it no matter how little information I had. It's important to report such incidents. What if the person is known to the police? What if they try it again, and your report helps them get a longer sentence because it shows they tried it before? And what if he targets someone else? Reporting it might prevent that. Always do the right thing and report such incidents. It might save a life. I'll never know what he had in mind for me, but I can make some guesses. And none of them are good. I can't prove it was the same man from the basketball courts, but who else could it be? I'm just relieved he never came back after that. I do regret not calling the police, as they could have checked for fingerprints. But being someone who likes to handle things herself, I didn't call, which was a mistake. Many years have passed, and I've learned from that experience. Now I'm extra cautious. I make sure all the windows are locked, and every night I double-check that all the doors are locked too. I keep my gun on my bedside table with nothing else near it. I've also learned how to firmly and clearly shut people down. Stay safe out there, everyone. You can say no and end a conversation without being rude, so don't be afraid to do that. History 2. Over about 8 years, we experienced a few attempted break-ins at our house. It didn't happen often, but there were about 5 incidents. Surprisingly, one of the attempts was by one of our neighbors. To give you some background, we live in Tucson, Arizona, in an eastern neighborhood close to the Air Force Base. We moved here in 2009 when I was finishing 5th grade. Our house wasn't in the best condition, but we had no other choice. My parents had my 2 younger brothers, born in 2007 and 2008, and we couldn't fit into a small 2-bedroom apartment. Plus, there was me and my sister, who was 3 years younger than me. The first attempted break-in happened in late August 2009. My dad was working the night shift, and my mom was in her room folding laundry while I was doing my homework. I had just started middle school and wanted to stay on top of my schoolwork. At the same time, my little sister, let's call her Emily, was playing with our baby brothers, Jake and Tommy. It was around 9 p.m. when I heard a noise coming from the fence. It was the sound the fence makes when someone jumps over it. Our fence isn't very high, just about 4 or 5 feet, so even I could easily climb over it back then. I thought maybe I was just imagining things, or it could have been one of the stray cats that often roamed our area. Emily quickly went to our shared bedroom at the back of the house, while my parents' room was at the front next to my baby brother's room. In less than 2 minutes, I heard Emily scream really loudly and the back door handle shaking like crazy. It turned out that when Emily entered the room, she heard a tapping on our window. She thought it was our mom outside needing help with the laundry on the clothesline. When Emily opened the blinds, she saw a white man with striking green eyes looking back at her. She screamed and rushed out of the room to find my mom. That's when I heard the back door handle shaking vigorously. My mom came to us in the living room and told me to grab my brothers. She instructed us to hide in her room with Emily while she was on the phone with the 911 operator. We also heard someone trying to open the screen door near our back door, but we knew they probably couldn't open it because we never used it and had a big vanity blocking it. In less than 5 minutes, the police arrived, but as usual, the person who tried to break in had already left. The next time it happened was in 2013. Emily and I were getting ready for school around 7 a.m. Our school started a bit later than usual that day, so we were taking our time. We were the only ones at home because our parents had to start work at 7 a.m. They had dropped off my brothers at my grandparents' place. Everything seemed okay until we heard the fence making that jumping over sound again. This time we had a Belgian Malinois dog named Rex, and he was already on high alert. We heard the back door handle shaking again, and Rex went wild. I hurried to open the door, and then Rex chased after the person. We couldn't but see the guy very well, because when I looked out the front door, he was already running down the street. We called our parents and then left for school. In 2014, one of our cars was broken into during the night, but luckily they didn't steal anything. My parents usually leave valuable things in their cars, so the person who broke in didn't find anything worth taking. The fourth attempt happened in 2016. My brothers, who were 9 and 8 at the time, were involved. They were sleeping in their rooms when suddenly they woke up feeling alert. They didn't know why, but they turned to the window and saw a shadowy figure of a man standing outside, trying to peek in and saying, "I can see you." My brothers had curtains that weren't completely dark but not see-through either. At first, they were really scared and didn't want to shout, but Jake, the older one, wanted to scare the man away. He threw his shoes at the window, which scared the man off. It was funny hearing my little brothers tell us this story the next morning, but it was also scary because we didn't know how long that man had been standing there. The most recent incident happened a few nights ago. I've moved out of the house since then. Emily is now 22, I'm 26, and Jake and Tommy are 16 and 15. It was around 5 p.m. when I was turning the corner to my parents' house. Our next-door neighbors had their expensive truck parked in their driveway. Usually I don't pay much attention to the neighbors, but this time I noticed two men standing by the truck, looking at it. They noticed me when I pulled up to my parents' driveway. As I was getting out of the car, the two men left the truck and started walking toward me. At first I thought they might be friends of our neighbors checking out the truck, but I didn't see my neighbors outside anywhere. I felt something was really suspicious because these two men were white, and our neighbors are Latino. I had never seen these men before, and I had never seen our neighbors with white friends, as they often have parties. I just had a feeling these men were up to no good. They were walking so close to my car that they could almost touch me if they stretched out their hand. We made eye contact, and as I walked away I asked them, "What's the matter with you guys?" They didn't say anything and just continued to walk slowly. When I reached the front door, my parents were there. I asked them if our neighbors, Jose and Maria, knew that two men were looking at their truck. While my family was setting up dinner, my mom and I went next door to talk to our neighbors. Maria was at home with her two little girls and didn't notice the men near her car. She didn't hear her phone's notification from the Ring camera that detected the men. Maria told us that this was the third time she had seen these men in the last 2 days. Her husband, Jose, works in construction and sometimes has to leave for the night shift or very early in the morning, so Maria is often alone with her girls. We advised Maria to be very careful and let her know that if anything happened, she could call us for help. On the same night, my siblings told me that the men came back to try to break into Maria's house. She called my parents for help. Fortunately, our neighbors from across the street were in their garage and heard the noise. They rushed to help Maria. One of the men ran away, and the other was caught by the neighbors. They held him down until the police arrived. These men originally wanted to break into the house in the middle of the night and steal things to sell for money to support their drug habit. They had noticed Maria's truck earlier in the afternoon, thinking they could break into it instead of the house. When I showed up, their plans didn't work out, so they tried to break into Maria's home instead. Thankfully, Maria and her little girls weren't harmed. The neighborhood has been getting worse over time, with more homes being targeted or burglarized. Even though our house was frequently a target for break-ins, we don't think it's the same people who tried to rob us several years ago. Many people in the area are worried about what's happening. Fortunately, in recent years, despite all these incidents, no one has been physically hurt. My parents are moving to a smaller house after living there for 13 years. They made this choice because the new landlord said HVJTM'd increase the rent by 30%. Believe me, the house isn't worth that much, especially in this neighborhood. History 3. I'm a 17-year-old guy, but last year I had a bad accident that almost killed me. Since then, I sometimes have chest pain and trouble breathing for no reason. My arms and legs also shake on their own occasionally. I live in the countryside on a big property with lots of bushes and trees. I'm really cautious and don't trust strangers. One night it was 1:30 in the morning, and I was watching a movie on the couch while my parents were sleeping. My sister was out of town having fun. Suddenly I saw a bright light outside that turned on because it sensed motion. The windows were closed, but the light was so strong that it shined through the gaps in the window blinds. Then I heard the back door making noise. I thought it was my sister returning from her night out, but she didn't come in for another 20 minutes. I asked her why she stayed outside for so long, and she said she had just gotten home. I thought it was probably the strong wind because there was a big storm that night. My sister and I went to bed in separate rooms. The next night, at 1:15 a.m., I was in the kitchen making a sandwich. The kitchen is connected to the garage. I should mention that my dog and cat sleep in the garage. Suddenly, my dog started barking loudly and acting crazy for no apparent reason. I thought my dog was barking at the cat, but when he didn't stop after a minute, I got worried. I remembered what happened the night before. I'm always anxious, so I went to get a knife because the guns were in the garage. Just as I was about to enter the garage, my dog suddenly stopped barking. I listened at the garage door for a few minutes, but there was no noise. I felt really scared, so I decided to go to bed. I planned to talk to my parents about it the next day, but they didn't take it seriously. Now it's the next night, and it's 1:46 a.m. I was half expecting my dog to start barking again, and I had my knife ready, just as I thought it happened. My dog went wild again, barking like crazy. This time I hurried to the garage, and as I got closer, I heard noises inside. I was sure someone was in there. I opened the door quickly, but there was nothing there. I searched the whole garage but found nothing. I told my mom about it because my dad was away on a business trip. I suggested we might need to call the police, but she didn't believe me and said I couldn't call them. I went back downstairs thinking maybe I was going crazy and that it was all in my head. That's when I heard a whistle coming through the window. I rushed to the window and opened the blinds, but there was nothing outside. As I headed towards the garage, I heard a tap and then another whistle at the kitchen window. I quickly opened the blinds and saw that the motion sensor light was on. I went into the garage to get a shotgun, but it was empty. I searched for the bullets but couldn't find any. Then I realized that not only were the shotgun bullets missing, but all the bullets for the rifle, pistol, and revolver were gone too. I heard 3 taps on the garage door next to me, followed by another whistle and a laugh. Fortunately, I knew where my dad had hidden the spare bullets. I got the bullets from the secret stash, which the person didn't find. When I returned to the living room, I heard more taps, whistles, and even laughter at every window. It was happening at the living room window, the kitchen window, the game room window, the garage window, and all over. The person kept tapping, whistling, and sometimes laughing at every window. I rushed out the door with my gun ready. The person had disappeared, or so I thought. When I looked up, I saw a tall, slim figure in a hoodie on the roof. I was about to shoot when I suddenly couldn't breathe due to my health condition. I fell to the cold ground, aiming my gun at the person on the roof, but my body started shaking uncontrollably. The person jumped down and, believe it or not, put his lips right next to my ear and started whistling. I thought I was about to die. Then he walked towards my pool. After a few minutes, I managed to get back on my feet, using my shotgun like a walking aid because my legs were still shaking. I thought the person had left, so I went back inside. This time, my mom believed me, and we were about to call the police when we looked out the window and saw the person's head popping out from our pool. The police came and searched our property. They found all the missing bullets in our shed. There were muddy footprints all over our property, and to make it even scarier, the words, "Oh no," were carved into the wall. We also found out that he got into the garage by moving a heavy metal plate that blocked a hole to the outside. It was a complete nightmare. To the person who was whistling and laughing like a maniac, I dare you to come back so I can finish the job this time.